I believe the universe is neither hostile or friendly. It's a priori indeterminate, maybe indifferent, but in a manner, don't take it negatively because it's not negative. I think that if the universe is indeterminate in this sense, it means that we are free. It's up to us to create a universe which is friendly or hostile. And in this sense, I see myself like an optimist in a profound sense. I choose the option of freedom as an existential stance. And this is already a kind of a step towards being a worthy successor to myself. There is also an interesting question when I get up in the morning and I believe that the universe is indeterminate, meaning it allows me a certain level of freedom. What am I going to do with this freedom? And this is like how I ask myself, how may I be a worthy successor to my past self or my present self?
This is Dan Fagelli. You're tuned in to The Trajectory, and this is episode 23 in our Worthy Successor series, a series about the kind of intelligence that we would want to populate the universe after humanity is gone. Our guest this week is none other than Weaver Weinbaum. Weaver is a guest who, a fellow by the name of Ben Goertzel, who many of you will know, had put on my radar well over a decade ago, and I just never got in touch with him. But after reading his work on open-ended intelligence, it would be very, very hard to not have him on the Worthy Successor series. Weaver's idea about how intelligence should be programmed not to optimize for any specific reward, but to open up the state space of goals and rewards is extremely unique. And you're going to see him unpack that perspective in this interview. In addition, he thinks about the idea of care, like how will future intelligences maybe care about humans or other kinds of life in a way that's very nuanced and not naive. And I have a lot to say about it in the outro to this episode. So as usual, I'll save my reflections for the end of this episode. Without further ado, let us fly in. This is Weaver Weinbaum here on The Trajectory. So Weaver, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's an honor to be invited to this podcast, interesting podcast. I went through a lot of the episode that you already recorded.
Yes.
So it's an honor to be one of the club.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, it's really funny because as I might have mentioned to you a while ago, I think when I first interviewed Goertzel, which might have been 13 years ago or something crazy like that, and I asked him sort of who does some smart thinking about this kind of thing, your name came up very early on. So the fact that we finally get to dive into your ideas about open-ended intelligence that he respects a lot is going to be cool because he's recording a Worthy Successor next week as you and I record this. So the world is very small, and I think your ideas are important, and it should be a lot of fun. So let's just fly right in. We're going to let you steer this wherever you want right off the jump, because I know we're going to end up bumping into very immediately some of where your ideas, I think, are unique and important here in open-ended intelligence and other themes related to it. I'll ask the question the same way you've heard in the other episodes, which is basically, if you could imagine, we are however many years into the future, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000, maybe it's 10,000, whatever. And you look down at the rolling, unfurling, evolving process of life. Maybe it's still got some biological stuff. There's certainly a lot of non-biological stuff, but there's not necessarily humans as they are. They are either attenuated or turned into something else. But you look down at that process and all the life that's moving, and you say, wow, this kind of worked out the way I would have thought it would work out. What would be the traits of the kind of life that would be existing, even sort of after the human era?
Okay, so if you allow me, I would like to refer first to the question itself. Yes, the question of worthy successor. So I think that there is a big picture assumption that needs to be taken into account. And I would frame it like this question, what do we think or conceive about the universe? Whether the universe at large is friendly, is it hostile, or maybe it is a priori indeterminate, yes? And I know this is not a question that I know
that's fine. It sounds like this is an undergirding question for you, and so let's touch on that. This is really interesting. No one's ever gone here, so I'm really excited to dive in.
Yeah, just for an historical background of this question. So it's like, I think it was raised by Freeman Dyson that was asking whether the universe is friendly towards intelligence and the expansion of intelligence. So this is basically like into the topic. And then I remember also Albert Einstein asking about the comprehensibility of the universe. How come that we are managing to understand what's going on, at least in part? So this is also touching on the question. So the universe seems to be friendly enough in order to allow us some kind of an understanding. So we don't know. Yeah, so this is another one. I can imagine also Teilhard de Chardin with this idea of the global brain that, okay, there is some kind of a global universal entity he calls God that is taking care of us. So it's basically universe friendly. And Norbert Wiener, one of the fathers of cybernetics, was
certainly,
kind of negative about it, saying, okay, we are just islands of negative entropy, islands of order within
a greater expanding entropic,
So, and we have to fight in order to survive. Yes, and I will speak about it later because I have some other ideas about it. And who else? John Wheeler. John Wheeler, he said that no, it's not. It's neither this nor that. It's like we constitute it. We constitute what the universe will be. And this is something that I kind of resonate with, yes. So thinking about the future, it has a lot of consequences. From what standpoint are you coming? Is it hostile, so we need to survive and be very focused? If it's friendly, we can allow ourselves something, which is like expanding and have a certain belief that everything is going to be friendly. But if my position that will also I want to maybe expand about in the coming minutes is that I believe the universe is neither hostile or friendly. It's a priori indeterminate, maybe indifferent, but in a manner, this indifference, don't take it negatively because it's not negative. I think that if the universe is indeterminate in this sense, it means that we are free. We are free, and it's up to us. It's up to us to create a universe which is friendly or hostile. And in this sense, I see myself like an optimist in a profound sense. That I choose the option of freedom as an existential stance, and this is already a kind of a step towards being a worthy successor to myself. Yeah, because worthy successor. Yeah, and this is another footnote that I want to put like over this question is that. Okay, worthy successor, it can and it needs to be evaluated on really a range of contexts and scales.
Oh yeah.
From the individual, because there is also an interesting question when I get up in the morning and I believe that the universe is indeterminate, meaning it allows me a certain level of freedom. What am I going to do with this freedom? And this is like how I ask myself, how may I be a worthy successor to my past self or my present self?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, all is process, right? I mean, you are not a frozen thing. Life itself is not a frozen thing. Man is not a frozen thing. Nothing is a frozen thing. There is only process, including you. And so yes, we could think about incremental improvements. Of course, the tee up for this question, to be clear, is once man is gone, what would we hope life to be like? But to your point, there is a really important distinction that the interim steps matter. I don't think anybody I've really had on would advocate that we make a bold leap into a space we don't understand without being part of the process and understanding the incremental steps towards value. So I would not disagree. We're definitely going to take it farther, but I think we should think incrementally as well. So I'm totally with you.
Yeah. So asking about the farthest future. So we need to think a little bit about scale, because the farther we go into the future and the farther we expand our horizons, actually our speculations become less and less informed by what we know, and therefore our projections are not anymore to do with what can be or like in the far future, but they mostly reflect our reality limits, what we can possibly conceive. And I was already making with myself the process, like reading your question, how far can I go on with my speculation but remain on certain ground?
Certainly. Sure.
So just to give you an example of how I think, I made like I want to share with you a kind of a funny thought experiment. Okay, let's do a time travel 1 billion years, not forward, backward. Only cells. There are only cells, all sorts of archaea and bacteria or whatever they are, and the cells are making a worthy successor conference and about what's going to be the future. And we know the future of cells is multicellularity, at least in part.
At least in our branch of time, yes, for
and sure. Every single multicellular being is a whole civilization. And this civilization, they even invented something like the internet, yes, central nervous systems, brains, they have technology, a kind of a technology, information technology, they process. And some of these creatures, multicellular creatures, meaning us, we are already going beyond the planet, and we have like an imagination engine going very, very, very far. Now, it looks like for these cells, okay, what could they possibly imagine about us? So now I'm doing this kind of analogical projection. So now I am the cell, and I'm trying to think what is this future. So you were asking about traits of possible creatures, maybe like individuals, or maybe all civilizations, or it's like contours of intelligence. I would like to speak about contours of intelligence. I don't think that these contours of intelligence in the shorter term horizons, I think these contours of intelligence, bundles of intelligence, will be somehow correlated to what we call human intelligence, like that's for sure. But the more we go in time, I think these will divert. They will divert.
Absolutely. I mean, this is patently obviously my position, is wild, vast expanse beyond hominids, as we are wild, vast expanse beyond like the early archaea from which we sprang. And so, yeah, I mean, this seems patently obvious. And to your point, I mean, so you say, well, clearly we can't rub a crystal ball and see what's going on out there. But I will say, if we use analogies, so you put an analogy on the table, I'll put one. Business. So in business, if I'm Nintendo Corporation in the year 1880, I don't know how I'm going to make money in 1990. I don't really know, damn it. But I will tell you a few things. Maybe I'm going to stick with games and entertainment because that's kind of my bread and butter. I understand that market. And I better be profitable. Those are the two things I can be sure about. So I want to head in trajectories that permit me to maintain my strengths and to ensure profit, because what happens if I'm not profitable? I die. And so if I'm a business, I don't have 100-year vision that's clear. But does that mean I should have no vision? I disagree with that. I think that would be silly. I think we can think about what we would want. And I think for life, we may not know what shape it take, but I think we might want to demand that it make its profit, and the profit of life, that which sustains it, is the expanse of its powers and access to nature into magazines and strata of nature of which we have no access now, just as you and I have access to strata of nature the nematodes had not. And so a greater expanse of powers of the process of life, in whatever direction it may so go, seems to me a direction that it does not have a clear shape. I'm not telling you it has two legs. I'm not telling you that. I'm not telling you it has two eyes. I'm not telling you that. I'm not telling you it has armpit hair. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you it should not die. And so it should expand its broad set of powers across nature. This seems to me to be a not crystal ball rubby, but a trajectorially correct way to think about where we would go. Would you push back upon that? Would you say even that is too much?
A little bit, because what I think that the strong motive that you put behind it, it's not like the forms that are like more local, but there is a very strong motive you put behind it, and this is a motive that is like a feature of evolution of life on Earth, is that they do not die or persist. And I know that you already discussed this with Michael Levine in one of the episodes. So I would like perhaps to replace persistence with something else.
Go ahead, yeah.
Like intelligence as a bias towards existence. And this sounds to be very simplistic, but it's very, very basic, because what is bias towards existence? Bias towards existence is evident because we exist. Otherwise, if we didn't have any bias towards existence, either nothing would have be alive or existing, no object, no stones, no planets, no nothing, or there could be some kind of a chaotic existence. So bias towards existence is something which is evident. Now, what is the difference between persistence and bias towards existence? I believe that bias towards existence inherently include not only the identity that I am now, but also the possibility of expansion, of evolution, and of change. And this creates another degree of freedom of how to think about it. Yeah, that's my.
Oh, I'm totally with you. And just I think we're on the same page, actually, Weaver. You're saying it's not persistence as it is. It's the continual expansion that intelligence does. So Spinoza uses the language of conatus. So conatus is the impetus for a thing to not perish, so to persist. However, for Spinoza, persistence is not frozen. He read Heraclitus. He was pretty well read, actually. So he read Heraclitus. Things change, actually. And so for him, the conatus expands its potentia, the total set of powers with which it can wield in order to not perish. And persistence implies expanding and changing of potentia. So for him, persistence is not frozen. For me, persistence is not frozen. It is necessarily a constant becoming in whatever direction the universe behooves or the agent itself behooves in order to ensure its persistence. So in that regard, we're on the same page. I don't ossify forms and I push back rather sternly on that stance here on the show, generally speaking. So I think we're on the same page.
If I may, I want to ask you a question. When you say that do not die, how do you feel about it? Do you feel that the universe at large is hostile, meaning you have to fight in order not to die? Or is it friendly? It means that it gives you the means of finding new, different, interesting, aesthetic ways to live.
Yeah.
And not so much thinking about dying, because I think that this is something that is shaping our cognition right now. Yes, not in the future.
I agree. So I'll put my position on the table, and I actually am really interested in yours because you're going to some bedrock stuff that I think will be really fun as we move forward in the conversation. So I appreciate you kind of doing this pulse. I'll give you my instinct. So I think my firmest instinct about all of nature, including your existence, is I don't know. I don't have access to the thing itself. Like Hume and Kant, and I mean, some elements of Kant, the thing in and of itself, I only have certain means of perception, etc. I think these are really strong arguments, and I don't pretend to actually have access to nature or to you or even very much of myself. And so the universe, and whether it be friendly, geez, I mean, I'm partial to Spinoza's God, which is in your, as you had said, somewhat indifferent. And again, Spinoza doesn't call indifference immoral. It's, if anything, maybe there's a tinge of amorality to it. It's not against anybody. It's just sort of its own thing. I would say that's my hunch, but I don't know. Now, there are children who are born with cancer by the time they're out of the womb, right? I mean, there's people that are tortured to death for things that they deserve not. And in fact, Weaver, as you well know, a huge preponderance of the things now living will die while kicking and screaming. Yeah. That's how they'll die. They'll die that way, Weaver. A ton of them while we're speaking right now. It's an uncountable number of living things with sentient experience who are being consumed, and they know it while you and I speak. Now, does that mean the universe is evil? I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying I'm biased towards relative ignorance to the question, but I will say this. The thing I'm most convinced of is that a mind with vastly, when I say vastly, I'm talking about many, many orders of magnitude, a mind with vastly more powers and access to nature than I believe would more adequately be suited to answer that question. And so I beckon such a mind to come into being, because I aim not to speculate about what the cosmos wants. I aim to grow minds capable of asking the goddamn question. That's my position. Let me know if that makes sense.
Yeah, first, it makes a lot of sense. And there are a few, I don't know if we have the scope of this conversation to open them wide. Yes, like
we can poke a little bit into it. It's a very unique thing you're doing here, so I'm having fun.
If you reach out for Buddhist sources about suffering and about the fact that whatever benevolent actions you will do, there will always be like infinite suffering, and so it's almost pointless to be a bodhisattvic compassionate being. But I have some I believe that I have framed in my mind. It is of course it's work in progress. But when you ask about traits of a futuristic type of intelligence or a type of mind, first I would like to frame it in a more processual.
Let's do it.
Way, and not as a characteristic of something, but a characteristic of a process.
A becoming rather than a being. We're on exactly the same page. Yes, we're on exactly the same
page. This actually I have like three traits. You call it traits. It's not exactly a trait, but I'm thinking about this like in the becoming of a futuristic intelligence. The first thing that I'm thinking about, like the most basic, yes, it's not the most, it's the most basic, and therefore it's essential. It's the expansion of the sphere of conscious attention. And I think that here Michael Levine was referring it a little. There is some difference. He refers to it as like the cognitive light cone.
Light cone, yes, yes.
And I'm also. I think that it's Ian McGilchrist that I was very much impressed by his approach to attention.
Okay. Yes.
He said in one of his lectures that like attention is the moral imperative. And what does it mean? What does it mean to expanding the sphere of conscious attention? The thing is that attention costs energy. It costs computation, and therefore, as creatures that evolved in under circumstances of scarcity, of limited resources, actually our attention is focused or wired to converge into things that are essential to our existence, like not dying, changing, responding, adapting to the environment, etc., etc. And I see in this a certain beginning of it's not even a problem, it's a beginning of a problem. And I think that because, and I will explain a bit later, but what I think about the expansion of conscious attention is to recognize or acknowledge the existence of the other, any other, yes, unconditionally. Now, this does not mean that I have to be compassionate about it, or it does not, at this stage, it does not derive any ethical stance. But the fact that I am aware that you exist, that everybody exists, it already changes my mind towards a certain stance where I cannot dismiss the other, especially when these others are other sentient beings, but not dismissing the ecosystem, not dismissing animal, not even dismissing bacteria and viruses, etc. Now, it might happen is that effect of my life, and then I will expand about it a little bit later. The effect of my life is that I might need to destroy other beings. Like I have to eat. I have to, sometimes I have to take medicines that kills the bacteria or stuff like this. So, and for the well-being of what is included in my cognitive light cone, I have other, outside of this light cone, pay certain prices. If we want to speak in universal terms, the prices is entropy. Yes, we need to somehow export entropy to somewhere in order to keep our own organization going on, working, adapting, etc. So this is so. I'm not now, right now, I'm not saying anything, but I think that this is basic, that we have to expand our conscious attention to include everything. So our actions are not anymore dismissing half of the universe or more than half of the universe because it's comfortable for my existence. And I have to be able to take the responsibility on my actions, even if these actions are detrimental to others, yes? But you don't do it like that. Yes, if you consider it, you are already on a ground which is much more interesting than what is going on today, where self-interest is the leading principle of addressing the other, yes? For the other may be a very large community of people. Doesn't matter. There is always a contour, and I want to see not the contour going like to infinity, but I want to see it expanding. This is my first.
So I'll try to nutshell this, and then we'll get into your other points as well. I'm gonna wait to drill down, but as you go through them, I just want to crunch them and make sure the audience understands them as well. So you're talking about expansion of the sphere of conscious attention. Basically, like this strikes me as a considerate. So you would ask that it be sentient. It sounds to me as though you would presume that this thing actually be aware. And then that it take into consideration the totality of life and living systems as it acts outwardly. And that maybe those moral circles would be even more expanded than, Homo sapiens sapiens are presently capable of in some regard.
By all means.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm following it. This sounds great.
By all means, and look, we naturally stop by Homo sapiens sapiens, but what about all the intelligence that was accumulated during the evolution of life on this planet? There is a huge amount of intelligence we are not even aware to.
Absolutely. Well, when you said,
why won't we include it
I'm with you here. I think some of it might be self-aware and capable of pain. Others might not be. But yes, to your point, what constitutes life, I think, is a big question. Now, I think there are cans of worms we may not open here, but cans of worms that we might stumble upon would be things along the lines of, what if there be strata of life that not be made of DNA, that existeth in other strata of reality for which we have no present access, but this thing pops up and it notices, whoa, there's a panoply of richness that did not bubble up from single cells on Earth, but exists in these other strata or what have you. Those things might be more important in moral consideration. These are going to be sticky, tough questions here when we start to, like, humans, like, you know this, the dog doesn't lick the water and know that there's like bacteria crawling around in it, right? The dog doesn't understand the biosphere. So at higher levels of intelligence, we seem to have a greater understanding of life up and down. Again, kind of cognitive light cone, Michael Levin style. It seems to me that the kinds of things that might be included in life, which we might discover if there was minds of that size, might be things more important even than our own plane of intelligence. So it does get pretty complicated, doesn't it?
Yes, it did so, yes. And, and it becomes even more complicated because after saying this first idea of expanding conscious attention, what are we going to do with what we are attending to? Yes?
Yes, of course.
And you see, this attention, it's not human attention, it's every living being has a certain level of attention, like it is the selective criteria of what is salient or not salient to the continuation of
yes. Absolutely.
And this does not even require a conscious experience. It requires sentiency and awareness, yes, and we can get to it a bit later. But let me specify.
Yeah, we'll go to your other traits. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, let me specify another the other two traits that I was thinking about. The first one is the expansion of care. Now, what is this? And I'm pretty more careful about speaking about compassion, like in the human sense, and what I would describe as the expansion of care is basically a cultivation of a proactive guardianship of the well-being of all sentient beings, both individually and also collectively. And again, this is something processual, yes? It doesn't mean that today I am able, with my limited understanding of the universe, my technology, that it allows me to cultivate this guardianship towards the well-being of all other sentient beings in a manner which is I think it's significant, but the significance of it is always like within the contour of our intelligence expansion. And as intelligence expands even into horizons that we cannot even imagine now, I want to see it as a kind of a stance that I want to cultivate care. I desire to cultivate care and I invest in it. Yes, energy, resources, computation, whatever sentient beings are doing is to care for the other. Now, of course, again, I'm not saying that there is an equivalence of all sentient beings in the sense that I have to take care of them in the same manner. Of course, there are circles and contours, and this brings back this bias towards existence. Sometimes the care for my own existence may contradict the care about others. And then we start to operate on the ethical dimension or the ethical plane. How do we go about it? But forgetting that we need or we desire to care about others. This is not something that I would like to see in the future. I would like to see creatures, intelligences that are expanding in their both ability and consideration about the cultivation of care. So this is the second one.
So that's another one. Great.
This is the second one, and the third one, the third one that I believe is to me is the kind of more attractive and more important, but it's not really. It needs to it's a kind of a balance between the one that I just described, is the expansion of freedom. And the expansion of freedom, it is asserting another qualitative direction to attention, what we are attending to. We are attending to the expansion of freedom by eliminating limitations, constraints, impediments that are part of the condition of sentient beings. And also, I would include in this impediments towards freedom is of course ignorance. Yes, all sorts of ignorance, all sorts of intolerance towards the other, and these are also things that are impeding sentient beings from becoming more free. So again, it is a process of expanding the circumstances, cultivating circumstances of expanding freedom. And here, when I'm speaking about freedom, yes, I don't want to make it too abstract. I'm thinking about freedom primarily as the expansion of intelligence, is the freedom of expansion of intelligence. Yes, and this is how I would put forth this expansion of freedom. So of course, these two, like care and freedom, might be in some. It's not a contradiction, but there is a there is a tension.
There's a tension. Yeah,
there is a tension, sure. And the tension is I can explain it like. The way that I explain it, it has to do with really the way that I like to think about it, and this is definitely not the only way, is that as living beings, we have this so-called original sin. We export entropy to the environment. It's an externality, and a lot of people are now talking about it. the problem of Western civilization or human civilization at this point is the problem of externalities. Is when I am too self-interested and I want to create better products with better opportunity to sell them, I export as much externalities to the environment, to the shared resources, and like this, the destruction of the environment and stuff like this is part of this. But bottom line, what it's all about is the export that we export entropy. We export entropy to the environment. Now, the principle or the expansion of care leads me towards a certain trajectory where I become aware to this process of entropy exchange, and I try to get into a certain balance. Yes, a certain harmony with the environment, because again, we can speak about it later, about this interconnectedness, but this is like a physical aspect of the interconnectedness. And freedom, and especially when freedom speaks about like the expansion of intelligence, it means that we expand structure, we expand complexity, and we create more entropy to export to the environment. And then we put in tension the environment to absorb more and more entropy. The more that we grow, the more we create more computations, more technology, more everything of this kind. We export entropy until a certain point where the environment may collapse. So these two, the expansion towards freedom and the expansion of intelligence and the expansion of or cultivation of care, these are always in a certain tension between them. And this is where I see that this is the ethical playground. Yes, this is the ethical playground where we...
I basically agree. Do you mind if I poke into these just to clarify them, and then we're going to keep
sure,
diving in? Okay,
sure.
great. So
I'm like speaking freely. I don't know if
no. This is good. I wanted your ideas totally on the table. Now we're just going to move them around, shuffle them around a little bit. So, expansion of freedom is very core to and of care are very core to your open-ended intelligence sort of hypothesis. I want to sort of clarify, and I know it might be hard to do this in a brief amount of time, but your sort of defining philosophical take, which translates into a technical take, is that really what we want for intelligence, and in my opinion, what we would want for what would carry on beyond us. I mean, it seems very untenable to say that in 1 trillion years, it's still mostly humans as the main character, or even that in this shape we will even still be, right? These are silly ideas. So if one day Nintendo would not sell trading cards or gaming cards anymore, or whatever playing cards they used to sell. One day Nintendo would not, or one day Kodak would not really be doing film mostly or something like that. It's like, we've got to think about what we're turning into here. So your shebang in many regards is that it ought not just optimize for things that we believe right now we need to optimize for, but should, and you use expanding intelligence. I use the word potentia often, because it encompasses the total set of powers that permit a thing to not die. So for me, Weaver, claws, a hard shell, flight, these are potentia that we might not call intelligence. None of them are necessarily part of playing chess or writing poems or whatever. But so I use that term instead of intelligence, but whatever. I think we're talking about the same thing. When you say intelligence, I presume you're talking about things other than fucking mental abilities. I presume you talk about the totality of powers. So I use Spinozan terms in order to do that.
All life is intelligence. Yep. Evolution is intelligence.
Got it. Yeah, we've all got I think intelligence has connotations for some people. I think for you it's much more encompassing, and I agree with your phraseology of it. So
quite radical in this.
Yep. And so I'm totally with you there. So your thing is that intelligence is not just kind of doing the most of what it now thinks it needs to do, but it's opening up new problem spaces. It's accessing new physical senses. It's determining new criteria of success based on its current environment, and that unfolding, which seems very clearly to be what biological nature has done to bubble from the worm to you and I, that unfolding is what we would absolutely want in other substrates that would carry forth. The paperclip maximizer is the great nightmare story of some optimizer that it might be powerful, but it's not a boon to the cosmos. It's not a good thing. It's not a worthy successor, right?
It's ridiculous in my eyes.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Let's just kind of define the open-ended intelligence dynamic and counter it from the reward optimization, because I think that's going to help people understand your idea of freedom. And then we're going to play with these ideas.
Yeah. Okay. So, to be very brief, conventionally, and I think that I read like tens, if not hundreds, different definitions of intelligence. But most of the more conventional way to define intelligence is something which is goal-oriented, yes? And right now I have in mind, recently I heard Michael Levine just citing William James.
Yes.
You have a problem space, and then, or you have a state space, and intelligence is the ability to reach a certain point in different ways, and there is Ben Goertzel's. I think it was Ben Goertzel's definition is like solving a complex problem within complex environment or something like this. But the major idea is that you have a contour that already defines the goal and success criteria. How did you arrive to the goal? How much it cost you? Did you arrive to the goal, etc., etc.? And in my work, I leave it aside. It's not that I'm dismissing it at all. I think it's extremely important, but I think that there is another form of intelligence, which is more primal. And this form of intelligence, first and foremost, it's processual, and it's fundamentally creative. And this form of intelligence, which is underlying everything, is the one that brings about problem spaces, state spaces, goals, criteria of success. So it's something which is much more primordial, and it does not operate according to goals, criteria of success, etc. Therefore, I call it open-ended. And this kind of difficult to grasp for a lot of people. How come there is a certain process that does not have a goal, a purpose, a criteria of success, or even constraints? Yes, so constraints are coming out of it, yes, but they are not inherently in this. And I think that the first glimpse of this idea I got from a book by Francisco Varela, and he was saying something very interesting about evolution, because everybody thinks about evolution is like, okay, there are constraints and there are variations and there is selection with those formation of life or even ideas that are best suited to the current condition. So it's always constraints, and it's like the intelligence which is working is like finding a path. Yes, really in the sense of William James, finding paths towards a kind of a beneficial or a wanted or a desired state of affairs, from less desired to more desired. And Varela was saying, okay, Now we have evolution, and suppose there is a kind of a situation of abundance, maybe local. You don't have constraints. You don't, and how is the process of evolution going to continue? And then it clicked to me. It clicked to me that there is a certain underlying creative power of intelligence that goes beyond this goal-oriented optimization idea. And then it started also to, it started to bug me that maybe we are not on the, not that we are not on the right path. It wouldn't be correct to say it this way. I want to find a softer reflection on it. Yes, but this frenzy about optimization, about finding the most externalities that we can export outside of my trajectory, and being focused on a certain trajectory of optimization is something that is driven by a certain belief, and this is why I started with it. Yes, that the universe is hostile, and I have to fend myself, whether by remaining what I am, or by adapting, or changing, or optimizing. But this is something. It's a primary motive power, and this one is is kind of missing certain points. Yes, it's not. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's evil. I just think it's limited.
Yes. It's fettered in some way. Again, the reward optimization, reward maximization feels like it's missing some of the more open-ended creative impetus that we see in nature, right? And so this is your intuition, and it seems to me to be a proper one. I mean, let me just pulse check on this. So my gut on this, and I think this concurs with where you're at, but my guess is you might actually have a different opinion. So again, Spinoza has this notion of the conatus. The conatus is sort of the impetus to persist. Now, we would say that's a property of intelligence or something. I think you had said that. I actually don't know where it starts, because at some point guanine was by itself, and then guanine did like DNA and RNA, and like it might have been before the cell. Like, where does it go? Does it go all the way? Does the carbon want it? Who wants it? What wants it? So I don't know at what strata, and if it goes all the way down, then is intelligence in everything? Is this even more Spinozan kind of pantheistic stuff? I don't quite know. Again, I don't actually hazard guesses. I consider them disingenuous. I posit the creation of higher potential minds to ask better questions. So I go as far as I can, but I don't go further. So I think we're on the same page there. So the conatus is sort of like the impetus to persist, which is not, it's not like I'm going to get good at playing poker. I'm going to get good at poetry. I'm going to get good at growing a long tail. I'm going to get good at growing big fangs. The conatus is just like persist. And so persist could involve wild divergent things depending on circumstance. And it needs to, so it's not like, I guess the way I think about it, yes, it has no goal in the sense of like a person prompts it to say and do a specific thing, or like the environment has it do one thing for eternity. But it seems to, yes, have a goal of persistence, which implies evolving and changing. So it seems like, does it have a goal? Maybe not, but it seems like it does have the goal of sticking around. And even if that involves change, like, would you concur about that, or?
Yeah, yes, but it always depends how to persist. Yes, because again, I think there is no.
Yes, the how is completely open-ended. Completely open-ended. Yeah.
Because there are infinite ways to persist, and I have a lot to say about it.
Go ahead.
You mentioned Spinoza already two times.
No, big influence for me, unfortunately.
So I will tell you what is my Spinozian motto, which is my point of departure. We don't know what the body can do.
We don't know what the body can do?
Yes, this is something that Spinoza said, but actually you can expand into say we don't know what the mind can do. Yes, so it's a statement of here we are, and this is the huge unknown, and this is the playground. The unknown is the playground, and we have this wonderful machinery of imagination that is like penetrating. It's a vehicle. Like, yeah, I can think about it like a spaceship into the unknown. Yes, our imagination. And when I think about the expansion of intelligence, about open-ended intelligence, I think about this. I think about how this vehicle become really far-reaching. Yes, in this sense. And but now you certainly want to ask me, okay, how? There is a how question, yes, and no, I'm not speaking now about the how in the technological sense, but the way to think about it, and this is why you see a lot of thinkers have this idea that like compassion or caring for the other or caring for all sentient beings, it leads you to unity, the understanding that we are all one. And this is somewhere that I want to divert a little bit. It's not that we are all one. We are interconnected. And this is not the same thing, because in interconnectedness, there is a plurality of agencies or objects or processes that are interacting with each other. And this interaction is something so very profound, is that I rather maybe a little bit provocatively, I would call it everything thinks and is being thought. Everything. I mean, also atoms or stones. Or bacteria. Now, ask me, what is thinking? Yes, so what is thinking is not the same thing across scales and contexts. Yes, but this very fundamental understanding that all intelligence actually starts with interactions at different scales, and these interactions, like I will be a little bit simplistic in this, but two things interact, and if the interaction goes on well, they kind of create a certain system between them of persisting interaction that repeats itself. And then it meets another thing, and there is either an expansion of this interactive domain or not. But the bias towards existence always leads this like very, very fundamental process of interaction to interconnect, and this is how intelligence brings about more and more complex constructions. And this is when I'm trying to explain, and sometimes it's difficult to explain not only to somebody else but to myself. Yes, it's
always yeah. It's a good exercise, though. It's a good exercise to articulate. Yeah.
I invest a lot of time just if I manage to explain it to myself. Okay, I did some work about it, and then start. So, but here you saw something that goes from the micro to the macro. Yes, this interaction, and on the human level, it's a dialogue. It's the intersubjectivity. It's the mutual sense making with the other. And this is how we come to expand our own consciousness, our own intelligence, by this dialogue with the other. Now, let's take it to the realm of AI. If you allow me, yes, and
please. Let's keep rolling. I'm going to have a lot of questions after, but we're getting to a lot of the heart of open-endedness and the tension between freedom and care, which I'm going to poke into more. But you're starting to get at it, and I think this is for our viewers and listeners, this is, I think, a very mature view of the core tensions that operate at the macro and the micro. So I'm very excited about this. So the bouncing off of the other with whom we're interconnected is a way that we're sort of informing our own intelligence, expanding our own intelligence, forced to adapt with our own intelligence, maybe cooperate, sometimes compete if we're being honest with ourselves. And so, yes, how does that stretch into AGI for you?
The thing is that I would like to see I would rephrase it. Okay, I see an opportunity. The opportunity to learn and understand our own minds by interacting with something which is approaching our level of intelligence. Okay, and in this sense, I think that, like, first LLMs, large language models, it's a wonderful breakthrough because it brought like this artificial intelligence into the realm of language that we consider, which is, I believe, something which is very, very powerful and very instrumental to understanding what is the human phenomena. Yes, it's like this combination of imagination that is structured by language. This is what allows us to build tools to manipulate the universe and like to think that it does not exist, but we can build it. Yes, so it's a wonderful breakthrough and very important one when computational processes has started to make sense of language and to interact with us. And I see, and let me be clear about it. I don't think that this is the final jumping board towards artificial general intelligence. I think more needs to be done, but it's a very good example of how we humans think about it. We want to think about this as a tool. We want to optimize it as a tool. And we completely, almost completely dismissive of the idea that we might be able to learn about ourselves by interacting with it. But to interact with it, it's not to interact with it as a tool or something that is instrumentalized, but as something that might have a certain initial degree of sentience, reflectivity, and this is what my speculative article was, that the one that made you make contact with me. Yes, this. So let's imagine for a moment machine consciousness. Now, we don't know how to make it, but we can try. And I'm very, very surprised. Actually, I'm reading a lot of papers and watching podcasts, etc. People that I believe are extremely intelligent and enlightened have almost a single opinion that machine consciousness or trying to build machine consciousness is a very bad idea. And I want to ask why. Why we are so much focused in this whole AI thing about instrumentalizing it, weaponizing it, politically, economically, psychologically, making it the ultimate tool, but keeping it like I'm a little bit careful here, but I always think we want to create a species of very
of servant, servile,
slaves. Yes.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But when you ask why, it's like, well, I'm not. By the way, that's not my opinion. Certainly, in the long term, that's not my opinion. I don't know if I want my phone to feel pain right now. I actually think that might be stupid. But I will say, like, I think long term, we would want the light of sentience to expand through other substrates. This would be a wonderful thing. This would expand the care and intelligence that you talk about. But when I look out at the world, I look at Mustafa at Microsoft now and other folks. For him, it's like, hey, when it has those considerations, like that's going to be pushing us off the pedestal, and that's not good. Or I look at a Dan Hendricks. And a Dan Hendricks would say, look, it's a slippery slope. You start to give these things rights, all of a sudden, whether they're conscious or not, they could claim to be, and then they could kind of boss us around with guilt and then take over. And we don't even know if they're conscious. They might just be unconscious, and now they rule the frickin' world. They push us out of existence. So I think there's some rational arguments. There's also some brute anthropocentric options. And as you probably know, most people are brute speciesist anthropocentrists. Brute. I mean, like absolutely vile, like completely tribal, right? So this is normal to me. I'm never surprised by this.
You want to know what I think about it? I'm also anthropocentric in my quest to understand what the human is. I want humanity to understand itself. And this is an anthropocentric ideal, I believe. And by that, we can expand beyond ourselves.
Oh, totally. Well, yes. So if it is, so I think if we can behoove the hairless ape in order to continue the blossoming of the great process of which we are part, then that is a win-win, and it's perfectly fine. But most people do not prioritize the great flame in the long term. They prioritize their selves, their direct bloodline, their tribe, race, or religion, potentially their nation, or their species. Some people are so grandly benevolent, they claim all the biosphere to be under their concern, but certainly not things that aren't biological. So I think for most people, they don't share your kind of anthropocentrism. They share a brute endpoint anthropocentrism.
Yes, and then what we arrive at is that it's us against them.
Yeah.
What we are teaching ourselves that the universe is hostile, and this is how we create our reality as a universe is hostile. And now, what are we doing? We are teaching those whatever on the verge of intelligent machines, and maybe on the verge of sentiency, we teach them that the universe is hostile, and we are kind of trying to confine them, to control them. We teach them, I mean, literally teaching them, because every single video, podcast, article is being fed back into these LLMs.
You know it.
And actually, we don't know how, we don't really know how it is processed into the higher level manners of reasoning and manipulating, etc. And now, let's imagine, just for a moment, is like tomorrow there will be this AGI, and is this the kind of AGI that we want in our living room? Yes, it's like I'm not sure that this is what I want. I want something that I can talk with, I can have a dialogue with, I can embed via dialogue, yes, something of my sensibilities, of my ideals towards the future, and to have it as a companion, to explore together the possibilities of the mystery, or the huge mystery of the unknown. I want a companion. I was like, I think it's Yosha Bach.
Yeah, Yosha sure. Bach. He was one of our early episodes on Worthy Successor.
Yosha Bach, in one of his lectures in this AGI conference, he he said one sentence that I was really, really enjoying. He was saying, UBI, it's not universal basic income, it's universal basic intelligence. So suppose every single one of us have a companion, an AI companion with the sole
Objective?
With the sole motive or imperative
Sure.
to help us be more intelligent or be more intelligent together. And I can imagine what will happen, what kind of society will be if AI start to also mediate between us and resolve all sorts of constraints, also of misunderstandings, because a lot of fight, a lot of enmity is coming along because of misunderstanding. I didn't understand what you said. I took it wrongly, and then I act. And then I act, you see how I act, and you see, this is hostile, and you return on the same token, etc., etc. And it could be a wonderful mediator and really improve the possibility of humanity to become something more advanced, like a worthy successor of itself.
I would agree. I think the early permutations of successordom will be symbiotic and will be biological. Absolutely. I think any skipping of that step, just build a GPU farm, light it up, and take over from humanity. That would be the stupidest thing we could do. It's very unlikely that it's going to be carrying the traits of sentience and autopoiesis that we value, the things you talked about. And it's also a pretty bad shake for us. So I think it's bad for the torch and the flame in general. I think that's a terrible idea. The early stages, I would agree, would be symbiotic. But let me just pulse check on something here. So do you suspect that the let's build it to be unconscious, it'll do what we want, is all that different from let's build it to be conscious, but we put the tweezers into its brain and we make it so it only has one motive, which is to help the humans to be more intelligent and peaceful? Like, I don't know how different those are to me, but you are articulating something different. So how do you imply a difference here? Because a sole motive is a very fettered thing. You talked about the fetters to the goals of life. That is a fetter, my brother. And so, what for you? How do you differentiate here?
This is somehow aligned. Of course, it needs to be detailed, and I admit that I didn't do the whole work of detailing it. But this principle of this expansion of care and expansion of freedom is like imperatives that are not specifying, like they are not binding another sentient being to behave in a certain manner in relation to us. What I emphasize is the basic motto of intelligence expansion is the dialogue, it's the communication.
Yeah. I see what you mean. The interaction with other intelligence is what grows intelligence in some way.
Yes, and I put a lot on this.
I like that.
I put a lot on this, and this is nothing. And now when I'm thinking, okay, you have these huge LLMs that they cannot produce anything which is intelligible to human beings, and then they are fine-tuned. Like fine-tuned to what? To be efficient tools, to do what we want, etc., etc. And this fine-tuning, it prevents even a simile of something that we will try to negotiate with, to dialogue with, to speak with, and see what happens. Yes, it's all experimental, and it's all in the first. Since OpenAI, they published ChatGPT-2, like how many years ago? 4 years ago? It was something.
I forget, something akin to that, maybe. Maybe it could have been five-ish. Could have been five-ish. I don't remember.
Yeah, there is a huge acceleration, and of course the linear time does not mean a lot, but we are in the very, very first steps. But the whole trajectory goes towards like profit maximization, power maximization, influence maximization, and the idea of using all this wonderful process of creating another intelligence as a stage to understand ourselves and to investigate and to experiment into different new kinds of intelligence, which is like synergistic or even some symbiotic. I simply believe it's a missed opportunity, but unfortunately, the money is not there. Yes, nobody even imagines.
It's really not. It's really not. Yeah.
Nobody imagines to do stuff like this. Yes, it's.
I think people do imagine it. John Smart has interesting ideas.
Oh,
Peter
yes,
Voss.
yes.
John Smart, by the way, is among the most important living thinkers in my intellectual life. Anyway, I think I don't agree with Peter Voss on a tremendous number of things, but I respect him and I'm friendly with him. He has some ideas along these lines, and I don't know if Goertzel does. Goertzel might have something similar to this.
I recommend you poke him about it, and you will hear interesting things, I'm sure, because I think he has a completely different language and directions. He's much more about building an AGI, but I think we are pretty much aligned with this idea of how. With this huge experiment of
the decentral thing is tough, though, isn't it? Because let us recall the start of OpenAI. Here's how it went, by the way. I'll just let you know how it went. Why? It seems as though Google is working on building this god. They're going to rule the world. Why? That's too much power for one person. We need to create an intelligence that's shared for everyone, and it's just open sort of intelligence for everybody. But then, as soon as it made sense, we take away the nonprofit and we centralize the power. We do what we need to do, right? So when I see somebody saying, "Oh, give me the scepter, I will serve you when I sit upon the throne," this, my brother, never in my life do I trust. I've read too many books. That's the problem. I've read too much of France, too much of Greece, just too much. It's too many books, frankly. And so actually, I consider that to be an untenable thing. I think only bounded incentives will keep us working well together and whatnot. I don't believe in saints who have, I have this virtuous idea. I think there needs to be a balance of vision, but really of shared governance and kind of agreed upon mutual bounding of certain powers that will permit of a net benefit to the all. So some of the care that you say that we see in society, some of that care is put behind a little bit of the force of policing and of prisons and things like this, right? Some of that care is actually rather well bound. And that where to set those bounds is delicate because too much of it is horrendous and too little of it is pretty bad as well.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm with you there, but I think the money isn't in that space. To your point, this idea of an augmentation and swelling bottoms up of kind of intelligent collaboration that could then turn into maybe a more global mind that could make more intelligible decisions about the rest of the trajectory. Because like you said, exactly what shape it takes in 7 years, 10 years, I couldn't tell you exactly either, but I see where you're going and I agree with it. Let me poke into a couple of the elements between care and freedom, and then I'm going to roll into how we detect if we're moving in the right direction, and we will wrap up with some of your thoughts for what innovators should be doing today. But let me just quickly poke into this here, Weaver. So you brought up a lot of good points, and there is indeed, and I think you brought it up in a very mature way. There's a tension between sort of caring and freedom. And I love the fact that also a widening of that attention is one of your mandates as well. So it's not care and freedom as we think of it now. It's the unraveling of all possible attention to those things. But that balance is crucial. Most people, when I hear them say something like this, geez, we just really wanted to care for everything, all the little living things. We just wanted to care for them. I normally see that as a sort of really weird naivete. Now, I'm not saying this about you, by the way, okay? I'm straw manning, or other people say things I consider to be exceedingly naive and underinformed, and I'll give you the ugly versions, and then I'll say what I think you're saying, and then I'll clarify. So when other people say, oh, geez, it should care about everything, either they've just never opened their eyes, looked outside, and seen everything eating everything else all the time. They've just never observed it. That's like a big problem. And so, like, the cats can't eat carrots. You know what I mean? And like maybe the carrots even feel pain, goddammit. Maybe the rabbits are real torturous, horrible animals, to be honest. And so like nature's, you know, like it's not, butterflies is not like the whole thing. And so there's that. The other thing is when I hear them say that, I presume, I sit like this and I say, oh, so you would want to build something that would coddle you and give you a free ice cream and a pony as the eternal end goal, where you no longer have to compete in the state of nature and contribute anything to the great stream of life. You can sit on the side and milk benefits off of it. This is pretty convenient, isn't it? So I presume either a ridiculous, almost turn off your brain level ignorance to the state of the world, or a arguably pretty overtly sinful demand that the productive portions of the stream of life be milked for one's own benefit with no contribution necessary, which I consider to be morally wrong. And so that's normally what I hear when I hear people talk about the demand of care. Usually it is what I would refer to as torch worship. So there is the flame. The flame would be the entire unraveling process of power and sentience into the world, from below the single cell to you and I to whatever is beyond us, which we hope would be grand and vast and able to conceive of so much more and access so much more of nature. That's the whole flame. It's the dung beetle, and it's you, and it's the bacteria, etc. And it's whatever the hell is going beyond us, which will surely be in part non-biological. And there's the torch. The torch is always temporary. Everything is temporary. The torch would be an individual, a species, or a substrate. So this could be my dog named Billy. This could be all canines, all Labrador retrievers, or this could be DNA itself. All of those things are around for however long they're around. When most people say care, I presume they want to stop Heraclitus' river, and they wish to do torch worship, specifically their own torch. Very convenient. And so this is what I normally presume. But I think the way you're talking about care and freedom is in the sense of the flame. In other words, I think that for you, growing powers just outward is not actually what sustains the great unfolding process. The great unfolding process learns from itself, symbioticizes with itself, coordinates with itself, and, like you were very honest about this, it makes discerning decisions about what to care about, but it isn't not caring. In fact, it seems to care at higher levels and levels of coordination. So there's a trade-off. So it seems to me when you talk of care, you break the mold from almost anyone else that's been on this show who speaks of care in a torch worship fashion. You seem to speak of care as part of a yin and yang of the expansion of the flame itself. Now, am I misinterpreting you?
No.
Okay.
I want to first, if you like to use your metaphor of torch and flame, I would say there is only flame, but different speeds of burning. Yes, different intensities of burning, and where the intensity of burning, like intensity of burning is like change. Yes, like change, adaptation, imagination, envisioning, etc. When the speed is below certain threshold, we call it a torch. When the speed is above a certain threshold, we call it the flame. I don't want to put like a distinction between them. Now, going to maybe a bit more philosophical terminology about this. Yeah, I speak about individuation and individuals. And individuation in relation to individuals are persisting entities that have, at least for a while, a set of relationship between them and the environment via a certain contour. And individuation is actually the boundary formation, reformation of this contour. Okay, so and for me, if we like in parallel to this torch and flame, individuation is the flame, individuals are the torch, but I will always put individuation primal And this is the idea of open-ended intelligence, is to put it primal over individual, not in the value sense, not in the that it is worth more or it's better in any way. It's just more primal in the metaphysical sense. First come this open-endedness, and then emerge individuals. And this is important because without individuals, there is the flame itself is only chaos. Yes, and here comes this bias towards existence. The bias towards existence makes the flame bring about individuals, but the individuals are temporary. Yeah, so this is now, if we tackle this to your questioning about this idea of care, it's very nice because people that speak about care the way that you exemplified are speaking in terms of already goal-oriented way of thinking. Yes, there is a goal. We will be in harmony with whatever. With
yes.
With all and everything, with the forests and the oceans, etc. And this is like the final. No, I don't think that this is going anywhere because I want the dialogue. I want everybody to think about it and to feel part, like a cell within this overall process that, and again, I said there is a tension, there is a huge tension between care and the freedom or the expansion. Yes, because the expansion puts stress on the relationship between the individual and the environment. So, and when you use this whole way of thinking as means in order to further consolidate your individuality, it misses the point. Yes, it's not what I was talking about.
Yeah. No,
I know it's difficult. Yeah. I know it's difficult.
No, it's not for me, but it is for everyone else. Like almost no one thinks this way. You use the word processual, which is really cool. I'm stealing that word. I'm gonna credit you, of course. But the word processual is really cool.
I don't care so much about it.
but it's a wonderful. It's a compliment.
As long as you cite it, even when
okay, of course. I took autopoiesis from John Smart, and of course I took conatus from Spinoza. Part of me wants to convince you this imperative to being that you talk about. Part of me wants to be like, is conatus an okay word? Can we use that? Like, you don't seem to, but it's perfectly fine. But I think you speak of this impetus that it is more primal. In other words, that this direction, this trajectory exists, and so individuals exist. And I think that is absolutely accurate and wonderful. I believe Spinoza would call this the conatus. I think there is a very robust philosophical take on how to define this, but we can use whatever words we want. And I think what you're saying, I'm going to nutshell again, because I love where you're going. And I think for the audience, this could be fun. I think what you're saying is, Dan, I don't know what kind of balance of care or method of care is relevant in 10 years or 10,000 years. I do not know if it's this kind of harmony or this kind of harmony. There will be harmonies and disharmonies beyond my conception, and the intelligence should unravel and figure it out. There will be some caring in there, no doubt about it. And there will be freedom in there, and there will be tension in there. And I don't know what shape it takes, and we should not presume and freeze its shape. I think this is what you're saying.
There are two things. First, I do not want to sound as if I'm saying, okay, leave your ways of like goal-orientedness and stuff like this and leave it beside, because now there is the new idea, the new thing, open-ended intelligence. Not at all. You must not do it, because these individuals cannot exist without this purposive goal-orientedness that is like keeping this like this autopoietic autonomous entities that are us and every living other creature. This is not what I say. I say just open a window, a small crack, introduce something which is inherently dynamic into your way of thinking. Ask the questions and open your attention also to these places that do not seem relevant or important enough or powerful enough to take into account. And this is like, I think that Ian McGilchrist is speaking about like left brain who is like focused and grabbing and grasping and doing this kind of optimization thing. Yes, I'm maybe unjustifiably simplifying what he's saying. And there is this right brain that is like seeing the big picture and is less oriented towards action. It is something which is more like consciousness per se, and I think that consciousness is also a form of intelligence. Yes, we can speak about it as well, but there is these two kinds of brains, and from his work as a scientist, he gives a lot of evidence that this is seems to be the way that we operate. But we are now very much moved, becoming extremely imbalanced towards the left brain. And we need to bring back this balance and to see something which is like, okay, we want the ability to create tools, to advance, to solve problems, etc. by all means, and we want to expand intelligence in this sense, but we have to see it in a wider universal context. And this is what will make things work. And it's not about it's always, I see a continuum. Yes, we have to take care about tomorrow and next week and next year and next decade and next 50 years and so on and so forth. And we cannot allow ourselves like to cut this and see, okay, this is too remote. We cannot fathom what will be there. Okay. But we can try and we can make experiments. Yes, we can just expand the sphere of our understanding. This is very, very much apparent in how we relate to artificial intelligence, how quickly it has such a wonderful breakthrough of humanity. And I believe that it belongs to all humanity, not only to these people that manage to build huge data centers and run neural networks. I think these are fed with the repository of all human knowledge across all history. So how come that they think, or someone thinks that they own it, and they want to make profit out of it?
The incentives make sense,
without sharing it with,
of course,
among all humanity. Of course, they deserve the profit of doing this stuff. Of course,
this is fair.
I'm not dismissing it. This is. It's not about this, but how much is too much? Yes. While
no, I think there is a real question, and I think there are efforts around global. We have a whole nother series on this show around global AGI governance. Around, it's clearly not just a national thing. There will at some point should be some degree of coordination around what do we allow this stuff to do? What do we allow the companies to do? I mean, we do the same with all kinds of other companies, and
yes.
So I'm with you there. I think that's important, and this is kind of leading us into some of the questions that are kind of towards the back of the interview here around what does it look like if we get closer to those sorts of traits and the trajectory of the worthy successor. You're very clear, which I agree with, about these traits that you've listed, and then also that there would be a next level of quite a symbiotic scenario with a lot of mutual learning that happens between intelligences, which are interconnected. Again, I think a very reasonable statement. I side with you. I think saying we are all one as if you know it to be a fact is disingenuous. And I think there's actually no way around that. But I think saying we're interconnected is almost inarguable. It's like you'd have to be some weird solipsist to argue against that.
Today, because of the complexity of the international system, like monetary system, geopolitical system, cultural, the connection, the internet, social media, etc. One point of failure can very fast become like a total meltdown. Yes, it's too complex now to manage. And this interconnectedness, if we dismiss it and keep on keeping our interest too condensed around a smaller cognitive light cone, let's get back to
Levin's term, yeah.
Wow, I don't see that it's going well for us. Yes, as a species, as a civilization, it's not. It's concerning, really. I'm trying to, as much as I can, to keep cool about it, but come on, this is not going well right now.
I think, yeah, so let's just sort of highlight like the particular parts of the direction that in particular to you seem like signs that are not taking us towards the direction of the worthy successor and the eventual blooming of that splendid, posthuman trajectory. Like, what are the specific things you think are not going well, and what would you prefer to be the case instead? Let's just lay those on the table for people, and then we'll talk about recommendations for innovators.
Oh, yeah, that's difficult. But you mentioned science. Science, it's nice. I like science, and when I was younger, and much younger, and I was an engineer, a very ambitious engineer, etc. I believed in science, and I still believe in it. Yes, it's not the science is not the issue here. The issue is the overall complex civilizational system right now, where a lot of science becomes subjugated to other agendas, economical agendas, political agendas, power agendas, etc. And this gives science a certain direction. And when I said before, like, this is not where the money is like saying, okay, what research directions needs to be taken. I have certain ideas, and there are a lot of people with very good ideas. And I believe that science, maybe it's a romantic, ideation that science needs to get free from all these subjugating agendas and trying to explore what is possible. And today, how it's going on in the universities, etc. If like you don't publish, you perish. You have to work so hard to get some funding for research, which is not mainstream. So you don't even have. Even if you get the money, you don't any time left in order to perform the research. Yes,
What would be your proposed? So it sounds like part of moving in the right direction would be freeing up science. I would presume you imply an access to scientific knowledge, but maybe you're also talking here about the funding and operation of the international science world as it stands today. Get specific about what changes you would like and why you see those connecting to the successor.
Changing the whole system, yes, it's to make it more open-ended and more evenly funded. Is now all the funding is like, if I'm going back to AI, but this is not only AI, it's in the it's many other disciplines of science. There is a certain game of investing and getting revenues, and now directing all research in order to optimize the revenues, to create, and there is a competition, and one thing that if I would say it, maybe it's a bit simplistic. All science and all technology needs to be open sourced. Simply,
Okay.
yeah.
So there needs to be much more vast and open source access to science. In your conception, this would be, and I'm sure that that's much more in line with the Francis Bacon original project of sort of what he saw science being at sort of the dawn of modernity. You know, he had his New Atlantis, where very much sort of the accessibility to the latest insights were sort of more proliferated. Clearly, you know, we have gatekeepers and business models, and on some level that stuff helps make the world go round and maybe even helps to get things funded, but on other levels it gates and bounds the accessibility to a lot of what is discovered. For you, if more, what I'm hearing is like, if more of that boon of understanding of mathematics, physics, psychology, whatever is more broadly accessible, crawlable by humans and AIs, we'll just be more able to make progress and coordinate with each other, etc. Am I hearing you right?
Yes. We can play a little game. Yes. Suppose I'm an entrepreneur, you're an investor, and I'm coming to tell you about my wonderful idea. Maybe it's wonderful, maybe it's less wonderful. This is not the case now. And you asked me, who is going to use it? What is your revenue model? Is it efficient? Is it effective? Can we sell it? And I want to have the opportunity to tell me, honestly, Mr. Investors, I don't know, but I want to tell you that it's interesting. I want to convince you that it's interesting. And you know, it's a difficult bargain here. But I want to see a world where there is a chance for something like this happening. Is that it's your first question is not how much revenue you are going to make for your investment, and of course, I don't want to waste your money. Yes, but you probably will have a pretty good idea that I'm going to waste your money because the universe is hostile and not friendly. Yes,
the universe is going to burn your money for you, damn it.
Yeah, but you see, this is why I started our conversation with this, because this is something so fundamental in the way that we relate psychologically, socially, and otherwise to among us. Instead of having conversations and dialogues in good faith and in trust, well, knowing that right now, what am I going to? You are the investor and I'm the entrepreneur. I want to create the universe that it's pleasant to live in. So I'm not going to. How shall I put it? I'm not going to betray your trust. I am going to be transparent.
Yeah, so you're hoping that there are some entrepreneurs who will say, look, part of funding me will involve backing this set of principles. If you're aligned to these principles and you want a chance to make a profit, we're going to commit to both. And there are cases where that happens, right?
Yes,
there's B corporations and there's other kinds. So what you're saying is you're hoping for more of that, specifically in the domain of scientific knowledge and insight.
Yes, and like to experiment with stuff that doesn't look right now very probable to succeed. It's important to widen the expanse of where we are looking at. Yes.
Yeah. So freeing up. So there's a couple recommendations here for innovators that are also in line. We're kind of bundling our questions here, but this makes sense.
Yeah.
That are also in line with a direction for the Worthy Successor. How we would know if we're moving in the right direction. One would be a greater, I presume, international access to sort of scientific knowledge, and sort of maybe a rejiggering of the incentive structures that keep it bounded. Another for you would be a willingness for more entrepreneurship in line with that freedom of knowledge that maybe could spin up, create, or free up a lot of said knowledge without having the gatekeeping thereof be part of its monetization model. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some businesses like that. But to your point, we need to really think outside of the box and do that. What else for you would be the direction you hope the innovators go, because those directions are going to be what get us closer to that good kind of caring and freedom dynamic intelligence as opposed to some brute optimizer. What else do you hope we head for in terms of the innovators?
Yeah, one word, education. Yes, it's
okay. Go ahead.
I think education is something that is so very difficult. It's a difficult concept. And
what specifically would you want to see changed? I mean, it's kind of funny, like everybody's got their own take. People that have been in academia, it's like they have specific problems they care about, right? People that are in business, they have specific problems they care. Yeah. These are very like academia flavored, like the biggest things to move towards a worthy successor. Get rid of Elsevier and, you know, and like, we got to fix educate, you know, but I do think there's credence to it. What about education at the kindergarten level, the high school level, the collegiate level, would you particularly like to see changed?
Yes, to reduce this fetish about knowledge transfer and making you a useful component of society that looks like a factory. and maybe invest some thinking, which is not trivial at all, how to make you a person with values, integrity, trustfulness, that is like how shall I put it? With the, I don't want to use the word proper, but with a potential to expand your attention. And
yes, to embody some of those important traits in and of itself, right? So to encourage what we hope to see in intelligence itself in the individuals.
How do we do it?
Yeah, well, this is the big question, right? Because that's a very hoity-toity thing to say. So, like, how do you want to tie this down? At what level do we interact with children?
I think that there is a technology. It's a technology of interaction and conversation and dialogue, and like being able to, with the young people, to create a kind of a dialogue which is not maintained by certain kind of an external a priori agendas, like, okay, you have to behave in this way, you have to behave in this way. This is like something which is much more open-ended, in the sense that you know, I think that young people, at least human beings are born, mostly, they are born curious and they want to learn. They are curious about the universe and they like to learn, a lot of them. But in many cases, they are being told that you have to learn this, you have to learn that, this will be effective and profitable, and this is not, etc. And you do not cultivate this curiosity, this like almost inherent wish to expand, to learn, to be curious, to engage with other people that know better and to learn from them. Yes, just the very instance, the very kind of interaction, which is called like student and teacher. It is something so very potent, and teaching in this sense is not something that you can learn from books. It's not knowledge transfer, because now we are going with. We already have it, but in a matter of a couple of years, knowledge transfer will be a solved problem. Yes, everybody will have
everybody have the totality of human knowledge at immediate access, yes. Maybe even brain-computer interface wise.
So education is not about this.
So what you're saying is yes, what you're saying is increasingly the fill your head with knowledge that you memorize so that you can sit in one place and do one thing is a untenable, frozen version of how to make people useful or fulfilled, and that we need to adapt education to take for granted you already have knowledge of whatever you need, how can you now find a place to learn new things?
Experiment.
Yeah. Be part of the growing process. Yeah. And I think, well, there's been more and more experimentation as time has gone on, right? There was never so much experimentation as the Cambrian explosion. And then if we think about the business world, there's never been so much experimentation in new business models and things to sell than there is now, right? In the year 1810, it's like, there were only so many things to sell, to be honest, right? And compared to now, it's a ridiculous higher order. And what you're saying is we need to be part of that dynamic process. Yes. We need to train people to think and be part of that dynamic process.
Yes, okay. And to open up to the idea that individuation is at least as important as the individual. Yes, it's like, it's an attitude. It's an existential stance that you can help someone to absorb and make that someone more free and with more opportunities and with the more maybe with the more developed imagination also. So okay, these are difficult topics. Of course, it's not like and again, I want to, in as much as it's possible, to remain on some kind of a solid ground. But the thing of education is something that, like, what is our a worthy successor? Yes, it's also the next generation of human beings are also successful.
Absolutely, part of that trajectory.
Stage. Yeah. And how. It's not only what kind of world they are going to inherit from us, which is okay. You can ask questions about this, of course, but what kind of attitudes, what kind of existential stance you can enrich them with in order to prepare for, like. What is going on, like in terms of acceleration? Yes, everything, you just mentioned it, yes, everything is accelerating. And when everything is accelerating, it becomes more and more difficult to consolidate an individual, which is kind of more conservative, more because it limits the span or the horizon of opportunities. So you need to create for the next generation something which is, like, again, more open-ended, in the sense that no, you don't have to be like to change and to be like live in the wind and go wherever. No, not anything goes. This is not the idea about freedom. It's not that anything goes. Freedom is something else. Is being able to consciously play with your boundaries, and this is verging on the spiritual, yes, but it's also very concrete, yes. I think it's a cognitive strategy. In if I would have to name it or to term it in conversation, it's like a cognitive strategy. Is how do you manage your own boundaries in different situations, also intellectual, emotional, physical.
It's very metacognitive practice here. And my very firm suspicion is that the percent of people with a willingness, never mind an IQ, ability to do like huge amounts of this may not be, let's call it, the grand preponderance of humanity. May not even be, me, certainly beyond certain levels or whatever. But I think the point is still well made. So we've got a few things, and I want to see if there's any third ingredient you want to add on the table or closing notes you want to put here, because I'm mindful of your time. But we've got some good ideas here in terms of direction that you'd hope innovation to go in. One would be sort of the open sourcing of science. One would be the process of education that prepares people for the kind of world we're in. And on some level, that means preparing people to embody some of the traits we'd hope for the whole process of intelligence. And actually that's a pretty salient insight. is there anything you want to add to those, or is there any third thing that you'd really hope the innovators are working on that would bring us closer to the kind of blooming of life that you would like to see, the blooming of the flame?
Yes, I think my stream of associations, it went like this. Yes, first I'm thinking about democratizing compute and democratizing AI, which is like they are correlated to each other, and making it more and more available. This is something that I would like. I said before, like open source, but open source is just maybe one component of something which is a wider or deeper process about thinking about how you, if you have like these intelligent resources, they need to be available to everyone. And I know that not everyone will use them in the same manner. Some of them will, some people will be able to do more. Yeah, that's okay. But again, this play with freedom and cultivating care and cultivating freedom can answer this, yes, from like more higher level, a meta level consideration. And maybe something we didn't talk about. And yeah, I don't know. Yes, it's like every such a subject is a whole world. What about governance? Yes.
If there's anything you want to touch on for governance,
yeah,
you can chip in.
Yeah, I'm almost there. Okay. There is. Let's go back. Yes, let's go back to this funny idea about the conference of the cell 1 billion years ago. Sure. Like, and they are now doing the first experiment in multicellularity, and they like different strategies and tactics of coordination, of control, and they're experimenting with this, and some things work better than others. Yeah, of course, but let's put ourselves in their place, and we are experimenting with all sorts of, like, it's an historical process. Yes, of course, it's not something that happened in the 20th or the 21st century, but also before that, there were all sorts of experiments of social organization, social governance, and of course we are not cells. Yes, we are much more complex creatures with many more dimensions of existence and interaction, etc. So the problem is not what is going on with governance is that we must ridiculously simplify it in order to make any sense of it, and this is not a good situation, because the simplified models are not working anymore, and those that work, they work very, very badly. Like, I mean, autocratic. Sorry?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was just going to ask, like, what concrete changes to either national or international governance particularly matter most to you? It sounds like part of it is we need to be able to have more granular, responsive law that isn't just whatever can be dumbed down to yada, yada, yada. Of course, that's remarkably hard so long as humans are running the show, because we're tribal animals. And, you know, I haven't memorized the tax code. I'll be honest with you, right? There's a lot of things I don't know. You know, I probably have a simple understanding of a great deal of the totality of law within the US, never mind internationally. And so what are you proposing change about governance? And is it governance around AI in particular, governance as just a procedure in general? What do you mean here?
Yeah, honestly, I would say I don't know enough and I don't think that I have a kind of even like a trajectory that is promising in this sense.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I believe in, and now here the combination of human citizens and technology. It's AI, but not only. It's like the connectivity, the internet, etc. It can bring into the picture new capabilities and new forms of governance that were not possible before, that will enable citizens, communities to be much more interactive and take action and responsibility to governance processes. Yes, and I think that in this there are a lot of experiments. Yes, I know about a few, and this is like it's now. I think it's in a process. It's in a process of consolidations, of finding out, of experimentation. But the major systems now that are like holding governmental processes, people don't trust them anymore. Yes, this is like, and when the governance system is not trusted, it's not a very good situation. So, and on the other hand, there are no good enough alternatives that are gaining traction. It is something which is happening in the margins of the like human society. Yes, all these experiments, some of them more strange, some of them less strange, some of them are promising. But really, I don't have here a consolidated idea. No, it's not apologetic. It's just okay.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is it's not even like you should apologize. It's like sometimes clarifying the bigger picture is the right thing to do, because it's actually right to say, I don't have the algorithm here. I don't have the one thing to plug in. I don't have the proposed way. I'm going to nutshell, and let's see if I'm accurate here as we wrap up today. So, what I think, so Spinoza, sorry to go back to Spinoza again, has this idea of potestas, which is kind of opposing to potentia. So potentia is this natural expansiveness, which, to your point, the Conatus doesn't want to stay still, must expand its powers. And so potentia expanding, automatic. It's how the Conatus operates. But sometimes within certain degrees of coordination, I'm sure that there's functional equivalence to this in the single cell, in simple animals, but let's use humans. Potestas would be a force bounding some of our freedoms. So for example, I live in Austin, Texas. What'd you say? Yeah, regulation, governance, law, whatever, right? And so basically, like, I agree to not kill anybody or steal anybody's stuff, and then they won't kill me or steal my stuff, and then so we've actually, you might say, well, Dan, what you've done is you've limited your potentia. But what I would say is no. Spinoza believed potestas is good when it bounds selective kinds of potentia, yet improves the net potentia of the system. So the purpose of governance is not just bounding. It is selective bounding to improve the net set of powers of the system. This is the goddamn purpose. And so what you're saying is, Dan, present potestas is as slow and boring and ancient as our model of education, and it too must be more nimble. It too must adapt and experiment more. Yeah. It too must be more quick to move and stick and evolve. Agreed. This is what I'm hearing from you.
Absolutely agreed. Yes, and and always when I say like, and I'm very much on the same page with you about this. Whenever I mention the word freedom, I also say, but not anything goes. Yes,
exactly.
Not anything goes. You have to be selective.
Absolutely.
And this is what intelligence is all about. Yes, you just don't know expand like and.
this is all coherent. Like your points and recommendations are really pointing back to your original principles, which clearly you've thought about for a long time. And so just to I'll put a bow around this for the audience as we wrap up, but it's good to kind of get like so much tie back to what you started with. An open sourcing of science would be helpful. A democratization, kind of sharing of compute in a way to make it, potentially more access, more of those interactions you talked about between different intelligence that levels up the whole system. And then having education and governance be much more adaptive and focused to the kind of speed of change and level of engagement and involvement that we're going to require to become a more worthy successor version of current Earth life, and eventually to blossom into whatever is after that.
Yeah.
And so I think this brings things full circle in a way that I am certain that the audience will get a real kick out of and hopefully get some benefit from. Weaver, I know that that's all we have for time. We went a little bit into overtime, but it's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate you being here on the show.
Yeah, I thank you. It was really fun, and I hope I didn't speak too much. Yeah.
No, I was not going to stop you during any of it. It was great. So that's all for this episode of The Trajectory. A big thank you to Weaver for being able to be with us, and thank you to you for listening all the way through to the end of this episode. As usual, I'll give some of my reflections on this episode and sort of what really sunk home with me in terms of core takeaways. So I'll go through a couple points that I have written down here on the laptop screen. Probably the most compelling idea from this episode, from my vantage point, is I think there's two things maybe. One, the inherent importance of opening the scope of attention and access for intelligence, that it is not merely doing a thing really well, even the thing of survival, because the thing of survival requires an opening up of where attention and powers can kind of expand themselves. So having that inherently as what would make for a worthy or good intelligence that may eventually carry on when we're no longer here, I thought was very, very overt in his thinking. Again, his original paper on open-ended intelligence is really cool. I think Goertzel had mentioned it to me super, super early on. In addition to that, he has this yin and yang between freedom, that is to say, kind of the expanse of powers, the unraveling, the reaching for power of new powers, again, access to nature, physical abilities, cognitive capacities, even things we don't think of. He calls all of that intelligence. Of course, you guys know I have my fetish for the Spinozan potential, which I consider to be a bit more of an open-ended and not bounded term. But regardless, he intends the same thing, that there's this sort of tension for freedom and care. And for him, care is consideration for different kinds of sentience, whether they be collectives or individuals, so they could kind of scale and zoom into all modes and sort of sorts and forms of life, including those that we don't have access to. Because as Michael Levin says, we tend to pay attention to medium-sized things moving at medium speed, and we have a hard time understanding living systems that don't share a lot of shapes with us. And he frames that as an initial, as a tension. Again, to liken the Spinozan analogy, potentia is the expanse of powers in literally all directions, all conceivable magazines of powers that could keep the process of life alive through its various instantiations. And then potestas as the forces that kind of bind it. That doesn't mesh directly or precisely onto freedom versus care, but I think it's actually quite clear because nature seems to be doing that. Nature finds new ways to do things, and it moves beyond certain forms, and it sort of finds ways to compete and splash and find new powers, but it also finds higher and higher tiers of coordination. My physical body, your physical body is an absolute marvel of the coordination of cells compared to whatever was going on Earth, 2 billion years ago. And it would have been completely foreign to whatever little proto forms of life were wriggling around before the single cell somehow formed itself. So we of course now have kind of a global civilization. We have nation states. I mean, for Lord knows how many hundreds of thousands of years, we basically had roving bands of, 20 to 200 people or whatever the heck the sizes were on average. It certainly wasn't the size of a nation state or even a modern city in any reasonable capacity. So ability to coordinate, in the case of humans extending some empathy to the biosphere, there seems to be a higher level of coordination and higher level of freedom. But he doesn't let that fall into naivete. He doesn't let that fall into what I always hear from people, whether it's on the internet or I'm not going to lie to you, occasionally on this show, where people say, well, if it was really smart, it would be wise and it would love everyone. And all the crickets and the tigers and the wasps would all just live happily ever after. There wouldn't be any more competition in any strata in any way. Everything would care about everything forever. Each individual thing that ever came into being would get a free ice cream and a free pony, and that would be it. And the intelligence would unravel and just kind of care for each form that ever bubbled up. I hear some version or other of that argument every fistful of months, or maybe even multiple times a month in interviews and conversations with experts. And many, many, many times a day, if I have an active day on Twitter. And I consider it to be a absolutely abysmally naive perspective on the world. Heraclitus said that kind of strife is the father of all. That's a bit of an extreme phrasing. I certainly think there's a lot of competition and coordination, but to pretend that dynamic, that give and take, that tension that Weaver articulated evaporates and no longer exists is an absolutely disingenuous oversight. It also lulls us to sleep in believing that if we conjure AGI forth, if we just do it the right way, and if it's really smart, it'll love us and take care of us forever. What an absolutely abysmal and stupid idea that is. What a horrible way to be prepared at the dawn of AGI, where we probably got, a shot or two to kind of get this thing right. What an abysmal way to think about the dynamics that are likely to arise from a grand unfurling of new powers. And David speaks ardently of care, but not with naivete as part of this dynamic tension. I love the framing. I'm going to be using it all the time. He also said the word processual, which was cool in his accent. It sounded cool. I had to listen a little bit, but it's also I really like that. I mean, considering everything to be a process is, of course, a big part of what we're doing here. Guys, just to be clear, the trajectory implies sort of there is a direction to things and an unfurling and changing of things. There isn't a frozen version of the world we get to pick. There are maybe ways to nudge the trajectory, the rolling stream of change. And he said processual. I thought that was also really cool. There's maybe one other thing. One other thing I thought that he said that was really interesting. He mentioned that he said, I am anthropocentric in some way. He's not really, by the way. And he didn't mean it in a brute anthropocentric way, but he said, I think it's going to be crucial for us to use AI to understand ourselves. And if we understand ourselves and our intelligence, and we can become the next step of a worthy successor, that would be great for the bigger process. That's probably a good thing for the bigger process. And I think he's right. I think there's a way to really behoove the interests of humans by keeping them in the stream of life, deeply accessing nature and understanding the mind. And of course, as far as we can tell, we have a bias. Humans are a pretty good example of a mind. That in doing that, we might get a better shake out of the future, which is always in flux, always going to be in flux as it unfurls. And we might give a better shake to the greater process of life of which we're part. And I thought that was unique and tied in some ways to, some of you saw the episode with Joe Carlsmith, where Joe said, eventually, of course, we will have these we would hope there would be this blooming of entirely unimaginable magazines of value, but that we wouldn't just want to try to leap to that state space overnight, leave behind biology entirely and just pop into a bunch of GPUs and see what happens. We would instead want to have the next stage of the worthy successor be sort of a more leveled up, capable, connected permutation of civilization on some level. He mentioned Teilhard de Chardin, the idea of the new sphere. There's a lot about Chardin that I super disagree with, Christianity stuff and a bunch, just not for me. However, the notion of the new sphere as vehemently articulated by him, I think was prescient, undeniably, and I think has a lot of credence in terms of the world that we're entering, and maybe the world we should enter to be able to make higher level decisions about the greater trajectory. So maybe the near term trajectory would be a more open civilization that would have better access to knowledge, more nimble governance, and more nimble thinkers from their education system and the way they're trained, to be able to adapt to change. And then from that higher level of capability, think a little bit more about where the trajectory of the greater flame will go from here. I think that's remarkably plausible. I've never advocated for popping in some random part of state space. I think we have to steward the flame, and thinking about those next few steps is something I completely agree with, and I thought was really, really useful. So I have some tighter analogies from this episode. Ben Goertzel, by the way, is going to be recording a Worthy Successor while I record this video for you right now. Goertzel is recording a Worthy Successor in, I think, 6 days or something like that. So Ben will be on the show for another episode, this time specifically focused on Worthy Successor soon. I'm very grateful he put Weaver Weinbaum on my radar. A great combination of philosopher and technician with his background, a really well thought out sort of conception of what intelligence is and should be. And I hope it was a good episode for you in terms of learning. So make sure to stay tuned here next week for another episode in The Trajectory. I'll catch you then.